This is it. The Comedy Theatre, scene of their greatest triumph. It was on January the 24th, 1963, or thereabouts, they opened here with Professor Bruce Lacey and wee Ava Cutler in an evening of British rubbish.
The critics loved it. The next day, the papers were full of highly usable quotes. The show was in fact so well received that it ran for almost a year, and later followed with a tour of America and Europe. Bernard Levin, originally the most important critic of that time, described the show as the funniest thing that I have ever seen on any stage and in any language. Can't argue with that, Bernie.
Now, almost 25 years later, in a rambling ex-rectories in Norfolk, the two brothers, last of the genuine British eccentrics, are planning new material and new ideas, this time for the screen. This is Tony Gray, a doting father, seen here with the latest addition to the Alberts, Albion, his youngest son. And here is Douglas Gray, in his element, seated by the piano, surrounded by his vast collection of musical instruments. I thought what a grand idea it would be if they were to perform an evening of British rubbish just one more time, so I contacted Tony. Although he was busy working and planning their latest extravaganza, an Albert screen version of the Battle of Waterloo, he agreed. I thought, what a grand idea to regurgitate the old evening of British rubbish just one more time. So I contacted Tony Gray. By pigeon, as it happens. Here, lads, anyone know the way to Norfolk? Norfolk? Pig. Norfolk.
Albion?
What are you doing?
What am I doing? I'm looking through all these pictures. Look, if there's anyone here you can see.
Mainly, Tony told me, because Albion was always coming into his library and asking what were all the old photographs about, and why were his dad and his Uncle Douglas always covered in filth and rubbish, playing musical instruments and jumping in and out of dustbins. To put an evening of British rubbish on film would be a wonderful way to explain to Albion just what his father and uncle were doing with their evenings.
Yeah. Serves me right.
Something you are.
Yeah, I know. I'll tell you what we used to do. We used to do a show, Doc. Did you know that? Would you like to see it?
Yeah.
Well, if we go out in the barn, we can have a look at some of all the things we used to use. Would you like that?
Yeah.
Be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
All right, then. Well, come on. I'm fed up with all this work I'm doing anyway. I've done too much today. Come on. Oh.
Tony has always appeared with them on stage. Sinbad is usually to be found resting, curled up in the back of his old Daimler hearse, waiting to take the next show out on the road.
Come and see Uncle Douglas then, shall we? Yeah. We're going to see Uncle Douglas. We see a nice film with it. I think that would be best.
Of course, it wasn't just up to Tony. Douglas had to agree. He's installed his own form of bell on his telephone, a World War II klaxon.
Hello?
Hello, it's Willie.
Who?
Willie. Yes.
Oh.
Idea. So, it was all set. Douglas had agreed. Tony was on his way. As you can see, there's certainly a carnival atmosphere abroad. People were coming in from all over, eager to see this classic piece of theatre reenacted for the last time. The Alberts still hold the record for entertaining the most members of the royal family in one performance. While Douglas packs up a lifetime right vehicle to transport the props. Ah, the butler has decided on that one. Meanwhile, the scene is set, the theatre is filling up. Nerves are clear.
You told me this was done. Look at the tomatoes, Uncle. Can you find them in those bloody stinging houses?
Over 1,000 people are now waiting to see the Alberts.
Hello, Pandora. Who's that?
Tony and his family
I think he's doing some washing or something. Hello, Simba. How are you? How are you? Nice to see you again. It's been a long time since you've been back here.
Albion is growing increasingly impatient. He wants the show to start. He wants to hear the trumpets, bangs and clapping. He wants to see those old photographs brought to life, people marching in uniforms, drums crashing and bagpipes exploding.
Instruments and bagpipes and blowing them and... Did I hear it? Yeah? I don't know if the dogs like them. Right, they like them much, actually. No, it's a shocking racket. Do you want to hear them? Right.
There's a cat in there. A live cat. Listen.
We ready?
Would you please put your hands together and welcome the fantastic, the incomparable, the outrageous, the Albert.
What a grand beginning.
The first time I saw the Alberts was in the 50s when I was still at school. And we used to come, a friend and I used to come up to Oxford to whistle from the assembled crowd. But the interesting thing was Douglas and Tony used to play little tiny miniature instruments. And then I forgot all about them. I mean, they used to just play without the little group. And then when I was a schoolmaster at Eton for some reason or other in the early 60s, I took a part-time job as being theatre critic on a magazine that was then called Queen. It's now called Harper's and Queen. And I got sent along to this thing called Evening of British Rubbish, and it absolutely bowled me over, really, as being the most wonderful, irrational gag. And it just went on and on and on.
It started from an act which we used to do, but we got more and more things into the act, and so we decided to make a whole evening of it. So a good title was an evening. ordinary people would.
Yes.
Mainly lots of the acts were made from what we found and what we made and what we thought was funny, so that's how the title came, really.
I first met the Alberts just as a member of an audience when I went to see an evening of British Rubbish, which must have been humour did cut loose. And certainly the Alberts cut loose, but in a completely individual way. They weren't really like anybody else. They weren't quite like anybody I'd ever seen. At first one thought perhaps they were a sort of English version of the Marx Brothers. Then you realize they weren't really like the Marx Brothers, because the Marx Brothers were professional vaudevillians who created characters for themselves and played them, whereas the Alberts simply were themselves. That their kind of humour and their kind of lunacy was something that was absolutely spontaneous. It was extremely free and very inventive. Happen next. Sometimes it was very funny, sometimes it was strange, sometimes it wasn't exactly terribly funny, but I always felt it didn't matter. I never cared if it wasn't so funny, because they were always themselves. They had a great charm, and I think that's a rare quality, and I think I'd say they had great innocence.
They are people who live in a different age, I think. They dress differently. And they are kind of time slips, if you like.
Well, the Titanic was, because you read books about the Titanic sinking, there was a jazz band as the ship went down, and the only way we could do it in our limited mind and limited resources was to use an old bath and a couple of blokes in it going up and down. It represented the demise of the Titanic. Anyway, it's certainly cheaper than Lou Grade's epic.
Well, I think most people of our age, the Titanic disaster stays in their mind. But we don't mean any ill will to anybody, you know, the actual thinking of it. But we just think it's funny. People dressed up as a boat bobbing about on the stage. Yeah. It could have been anything. It could have been the Queen Mary, you know.
Queen Mary didn't sink.
I got a friend here.
Auburn, let me ask you, were you...
I like Jonathan.
I can't... I won't be young anymore, unfortunately. I can't imagine you ever being young, to be honest with you. I can't imagine you ever looking... Were you a bit of a rebel in your...
Morse code melody. I think I did make that. Yes, that's right. Gosh.
Well, we did about 5 records, didn't we? One was a Morse code melody. That was based on the idea that...
Sleepy Valley, Goodbye Dolly Gray.
But we did an album called An Evening of British Rubbish with the Alberts and Bruce Lacey. And the whole idea of this album was to put over some of the zany humour that the Alberts had. And I thought it'd be a good idea to have an invited audience in number 2 studio at Abbey Road. And so we had a lot of people. I had about 400 people came in. And the only sort of untoward thing that really happened was that I thought it'd be a good idea to have a rehearsal in the afternoon without the audience. And Tony said he was going to fire off a starting pistol, which of course is part of the, you know, they love explosions of all sorts. And I said, well, it wouldn't be a bad idea because our microphones are pretty sensitive to see what's going to do to it, you know. So just before the audience filed in, we did the test for the pistol. And he went to the top of the stairs in Abbey Road and fired the gun. And it was actually, it was a really loud noise. And we looked at the ceiling, and about 4 tons of dirt just descended from the ceiling onto all the chairs that were out there. And so we had to sort of clean the place quickly before the people got in, because it was about half an inch of soot on every seat.
The records came from cylindrical records, first of all. You used to get these old things, and they used to make them physically very difficult. They just shout down a horn into a wax cylinder, you see. So they
Oh, the pre-electric recording.
Yeah. I'm holding the phone. And he would, the cough would be left.
Well, he'd say, I'm about to try and make a recording. He'd say that first, and then, Mary had little lamb asleep asleep snow, and before he recorded, he'd actually announce what he was going to record.
And if he made a mistake, they left it on. It was too much bother to, and I like that idea. Not so much the mistake, but the fact that the thing...
Because if he coughed, he'd say, I'm sorry, I'll do that again. But he wouldn't stop all the machinery, because the spring was running down, you know, the clockwork spring.
Going back to Spike and them, I do remember that on one, I think a record called You've Got to Go Ow, which was the title, I think the Alberts were appearing with Spike on this, and they brought in their dog into the studio. And I think it was either a large whippet or a small greyhound, one of the two. And the dog was beautifully behaved until the red light went on, and then we made a take, and right in the middle of it, of course, right on cue, it barked. I mean, it wasn't directed by them, it just happened to bark. One sharp, short bark, which actually fitted the timing of the song beautifully, so we left it in.
It was terribly anti-professional. That was... Private Eye, you see, was unbelievably anti-professional, still is. And everything was glued down on paper, done in a very... The records we used to do in those days, nobody ever produced them. We just used to make up gags and leave it. Ingram's always used to say, well, that'll do, get on with it. And they had exactly the same idea, and if anything, even less professional. Cues were always wrong, because either Douglas didn't hear the cue, in which case the timing was peculiar, or Tony would rush in with some crazy ad-lib, which has nothing at all to do with the sketch, or the timing of the sketch. And it left the audience, I mean, they almost created a sort of, I don't think they were intending to do anything, but they actually did create a sort of completely anarchic attitude to the theatre, in which all the things you expect to happen, like exposition or someone coming on stage and saying something and someone else saying back, just didn't happen at all.
An English folk song. Preserve my image.
Otherwise, take that wig off, I know you. Have you announced it?
An English folk song.
Yeah. For the rest of it. What? You haven't finished announcing it.
The Dustbins Dance.
Right, that's better.
An English folk song, the Dustbins Song.
Picking the dustbins down the west to buy the best hotels, living on luxuries that they throw away. I inspect the dustbins regularly at 3 and find the pickings half a chicken tastes better if it's free. Keep time picking the dustbins down the west to buy the best hotels. The other day found a parcel rather small. I found some rotten tomatoes mixed up with ladies' garters. Why should the dustman have it all?